My name's Amber Nash. I'm best known as the voice of Pam Poovey on FXX's Archer. I'm also an improviser and performer at Dad's Garage Theater Company here in Atlanta. I grew up here in Lilburn, Georgia, which is just north of the city off of Jimmy Carter Boulevard. And I was there pretty much my whole life, and my family moved to Glendale, California for a short period of time, and then there was an earthquake, and my mom was like, we're going back to Georgia, and so then that's how we ended up back here. I think that living in Georgia my whole life, I was definitely a Southern gal, raised by a Southern mom, and my dad was Midwestern, so the Southern accent kind of was able to get out of my vocabulary when I became an actor. California was awesome when I was a teenager. I was like, I'm moving to Southern California, I'm 15, like a dream come true, 90210 was on the air, I was like, this is perfect. And it's wonderful there, but I did miss Georgia. I missed the weather, like changing. Like I know it's beautiful there all the time, but it's like it's nice to have like fall weather when it's when it's fall time. So yeah, I like Georgia more than I like California. And California's like, if you're an actor, that's where you got to go, right? And I was like, I'm going to do everything I can to not move to Southern California. If I can stay in Georgia, I'm gonna do it. Growing up was great. I was really lucky. My parents are still married. They're actually about to have their 50th anniversary. Yeah, and I have an older sister that's 7 years older than me, so I was constantly, I think that's actually where my comedy comes from, is that like I was constantly trying to get her attention and for her to pay attention to me and like play with me, and she's like, oh my God, you're my little sister, leave me alone. So it's constantly bothering her and like putting on wigs and dressing up and like dancing like Axl Rose to get her attention. And I grew up, like I said, in Lilburn, Georgia, and had a pretty like regular suburban life. I was always getting into fights in the neighborhood. I was kind of a bully when I was a kid. My parents had to be like, hey, this isn't cool behavior. And I was like, okay, all right, I'll stop doing that. I'll do comedy instead. I wasn't the most popular kid, so I was like, how do I make friends? And what I realized early on was that the best way to make friends was to get people to start laughing. And so I would do like whole like routines on the playground. Like I'd have set up like an area and people would come and like watch the show that I would do. My first character that I ever played was a character that I invented called Escaped Convict. And it was just basically I was trying to scare the girls. And so I would like run around screaming. Yeah, what a weirdo. Making my sister laugh and making my mom laugh when I was a kid was definitely when I was like, wait a minute, this comedy thing has something to it. And trying to find friends when I was in school. So I think that's when I first, and my dad's funny and was always kind of like funny in like a snarky ribbing you kind of way. And my uncles too. So I think that was kind of when I was like, there's something to having a sense of humor, and it makes people comfortable with you right off the bat. So I was like, this is a good way to like get everybody in the room comfortable pretty quickly. Axl Rose, the beacon of comedy. Yeah, I think my comedy inspiration when I was really little was Carol Burnett. I loved the Carol Burnett show, and my mom let me watch it. And also Lily Tomlin was making a lot of movies like in the 80s that I was able to watch, and I absolutely love her. I still love her. She's so incredible. And then as I got older, of course I watched Saturday Night Live growing up like every kid. And in living color. I'm such a kid of the 80s. And then as I got older, I mean, so many women in the last, 20 years in comedy have really exploded. And it's like, comedy isn't just a game for men anymore. It's a game for everybody. And like Tina Fey and Amy Poehler and Amy Sedaris is another really fun, like kooky comedy person that I look up to. So yeah, there's so many amazing comedians out there. And Carol Burnett is still killing it. Like I saw a live show of her. She came to Atlanta and did like a talkback kind of show, and it was incredible. Yeah, if I had to describe my specific brand of comedy, it's kind of hard because when I came up at Dad's Garage, I was the only girl in the whole place. There was a bunch of dudes that were all like in their 20s, and they're like, well, guess we'll let her on stage because she's like hanging around and won't leave. That was also being a little sister. I was like, yes, I can hang around forever, and she let me on stage. And so I definitely came up in a boys club, and so I think that I was more concerned about fitting in comedy-wise with those guys than I was about kind of learning what my own voice was. So I think a lot of it was kind of built by these guys. And then I got comfortable enough, and I was like, hey, I've got stories I want to tell. And so then they had to kind of learn how to improvise with a woman and women's stories and the kind of things that I wanted to tell. But I also have a very dirty sense of humor. I've got a terrible trucker's mouth. which kind of leads me nicely into working on Archer as Pam, because she's got like the best, most horrific things that she gets to say. So yeah, I'm definitely dirty. I always, like, after shows, I'll be like, sorry guys, like, I'm so sorry I went blue. But I do like to think that I'm pretty good at it, because I think that you can, in the wrong hands, I think like dirty comedy can be just like, why are we doing this? So I like to think that I only use it when it's necessary, and I use it to the right end. But, you know, people could say otherwise. I'm most comfortable doing improv. The idea of doing stand-up totally terrifies me. And I think it's because you're on stage all by yourself, and if you bomb, there's nobody there to help you out. But if you're improvising, you've got a team of people, or sometimes one other person. Or if you're by yourself, you're like, oh, well, I'm just making this up, so things can go wrong, and it's totally cool. So you don't have that in stand-up. And I think a lot of times, too, stand-up audiences are kind of waiting for you to fail a little bit. And I think improv audiences are a little more forgiving and, like, want to take this ride with you. But that's also could just be the way that I look at it, and that's why I'm scared of it. But whenever I have to go on stage and say something that I've memorized, it's terrifying to me, because I'm like, well, what if I forget this? And then they're not going to be able to do the lighting cue, and then I'm going to screw up the other actors. And so, like, I much prefer, and I think it's from doing improv for so long, I'm so much more comfortable at it, that having to memorize something and do it on stage is, like, pretty terrifying. Yeah. So I think the very first time I ever experienced acting was I was in second grade, and there was like a school play, and I got to be like an extra in it. And then in high school, I was looking for an elective, and I was like, oh, I'll do drama. So, and then I actually kind of fell in love with it. So I kind of came to it late. It wasn't something that anybody in my family was interested in. And in high school, drama ended up being like really fun, and I met a lot of friends there. And then I was like, oh, this isn't something I could do for a living. Like, that's just not where I come from. That's not an accepted career path in my family. I didn't know anybody that was an actor full time. And so I went to college, and I was like, I'm going to study biology. And then I was really bad at it. So I was like, I'll study psychology. That's easier. And then I was actually pretty good at that. And then I was working, after I got my degree, I was working as a counselor. But I was kind of like, I needed an outlet. Like, there was something missing. And a friend of mine had gone to see a show, A Whole World, which is another improv comedy theater in Atlanta, and he was like, you got to see this, it's really cool. And I saw it, and I was like, oh my God, this is what I've been missing my whole life. And so I started taking classes there. Like, I signed up for classes that night, and then through that I met some people. I met Tommy Futch, who is the head of Laughing Matters. I met him because I was waiting tables at Dave & Buster's, the worst job on earth. And he was doing murder mysteries there, and he was like, well, we're always looking for people. And so I auditioned for them, and then I ended up doing stuff at Dad's Garage because I met Tommy and I met people at Dad's. And then I just kept doing it. And then finally I was like, you know what, I'm going to quit my job and do this full time. And my parents were like, oh my God, really? And thank God it worked out. And I had some little jobs here and there, and like pieced together, like teaching and doing gigs just to make enough money to live. And I think the leap, I was like, I could do this, and it really worked out, thank God. So my parents aren't like, see, we told you. Yeah, I think having a psychology degree has been really helpful, especially in the beginning. Like, now I've been out of school for so long, I don't remember anything that I learned in school. But I do think that particularly like interpersonal relationship stuff, like, actors are difficult to deal with, and all the people I work with are actors. And so having a psychology degree definitely has helped me, like, you know, navigate those waters. But also, yeah, like, when it comes to like finding a character and digging in and getting into somebody's psychology, it's really fun. And I'm like genuinely interested in that kind of stuff. So I'm always like, you know, watching shows about like when humans go bad and like when they break. It's like, that's the most interesting part in the world. So yeah, it's definitely, I think, added to my character development for sure. I lived in Chicago for a very short period of time. When I quit my job working as a counselor, I got a job at Dad's, a part-time job as the education director there. And there'd never been an education director at Dad's before, so it was like, let's actually legitimize this class system and like make it a real thing. And so I'd been in that job for a couple months, and then I was like, you know what I need to do? I need to go to Chicago and take classes there. And they were like, we just gave you this job, you can't leave. And I was like, this is part of my job. And they're like, okay. I don't know how I got away with that shit. So I moved to Chicago for like 2 months and like sublet an apartment. This was before Airbnb, so I couldn't do that. And I wanted to see what the classes were like and because the Chicago brand of improv is different than the Atlanta brand of improv. And honestly, I think in Chicago, people are like, oh, there's improv in other parts of the country. And it's like, yeah, there's lots of improv everywhere. You guys aren't the only people that are doing it. And so I took classes at Second City, I took classes at IO, and they were awesome. And I'm really glad I did. I did like an intensive that was like 2 months long. And then many years later, I actually got to work with Second City because they were doing shows in Atlanta and they were hiring like local people, but also bringing in people from Chicago. So it's nice to have that connection because I think as an improviser, it's like if you're an actor, you go to LA, and if you're an improviser, you go to Chicago. But it doesn't have to be that way. I think in both scenarios, those things are kind of changing. But it was a fun place. Chicago's a pretty cool town. Like it's a lot like Atlanta. It feels like the size and the population and kind of like the people, and the food's incredible. There's so much good food in Chicago. So Improv Olympic is IO. It used to be called Improv Olympic, and then the Olympics were like, oh, you can't use that name because we're the Olympics and you can't use that name in your comedy theater. So they changed their name to IO, and they're pretty big. Like they're one of the big improv comedy places in the country. And there's several. There's one I think there's one still in LA, and they have I think maybe there's one in New York, and Chicago, and maybe Toronto. And they do long form like Herald style improv, which isn't my favorite, but I do think that there's a place for it in the comedy scene for sure. And a lot of people come from there and then kind of develop out of what they are taught there and make their own kind of thing. So a lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of different kinds of improv. And also too, people are like, well, that's cheating, right? You're making it up. And it's like, yeah, we're making it up. But the best way I've heard it explained was it's like basketball. Like if you're on a basketball team, you still practice basketball. And then when you play a game, you're still not sure what's going to happen. Who knows what's going to happen, but you have that practice and that training. And so improv is like that. Like you're not rehearsing a show, you're more like practicing for a game. And when I came up at Dad's Garage, which is a theater sports theater. And theater sports is kind of like a brand of improv that's short form and competitive. But there's another competitive group type of improv called comedy sports, which is more competitive, and we don't do that. So and people that don't do improv are like, we don't care, we're just coming to see a comedy show. But I prefer short form. So it's like you'll do a game and then it's over in 3 minutes and you move on to the next thing. But long form is really fun too. Like if you do, you play one character for a whole show, or we do like a soap opera series where we at Dad's Garage, where we do like we follow the same characters for 3 months and see what they're up to week after week. So I think they're both really important. I think they're both just as valid. And I think you have to be good at both to truly be a good improviser. Because some people are like, oh, well, short form is for kids. Like, I learned that and now I only do long form. And it's like, no, if you're good at this, then you're for sure got to be good at that. Because if you're not good at that, then you're probably not good at this either. So I was working at Dad's Garage, and one of the improvisers that works at Dad's is named Christian Danley. And he came to the theater around the same time I did. I think maybe a few months earlier. And he had just gotten out of art school, and he was like totally an art guy, but also loved improv. And he got a job working with these guys at Adult Swim making shows there. And they were making a show called C-Lab 2021. And he was an animator on the show. And it was literally like a little dirty house with a bunch of guys like drawing over their computers, like 5 smelly dudes like making cartoons for Adult Swim. And this is when Adult Swim was brand new. And so they were doing a new show, and they needed voice actors, and they knew all these people at Dad's Garage that were like, you guys are comedy people, like, you want to try this out? And most people had never done it before. And so I auditioned for a role, and it was completely wrong because they needed like a 16-year-old girl's voice, and I was just like, no. I'd been smoking a pack a day since I was like 17. Sorry, Mom. I don't smoke anymore. So that didn't work out. And then the character changed, and so they ended up bringing me in for this new character. And so I did voices on Frisky Dingo for 2 years, and the show got canceled. And then they kind of went away. The guy that was the creative force behind it is Adam Reed. He like went and did this like walkabout, like spiritual like journey to try to find himself, and then came up with the idea of Archer and pitched it to FX. And FX was also a pretty new network at the time. And they found all the like famous people on the show and then he was like, hey, we have a role in the show. Do you want to do it? And I thought it was just kind of the same stuff they'd been doing for Adult Swim. And I was like, yeah, sure. I just need a job. I'm just an actor that needs a job. And then I realized like it was a big deal, and there was like famous people on the show. And I was like, oh, I guess I should start actually like reading my scripts before I come in and like maybe brush my teeth. So I just kind of lucked into it. I didn't even have to audition for the role. So it's pretty cool. Pretty lucky. Yeah, I never really thought of voice acting as a thing. Like, I didn't really know much about it, and I kind of assumed that there was the people that did that, and then there's the people that did like regular acting, or there's theater people and there's movie people, you know, like on camera people. And I just needed gigs. And so like the first time I actually did anything was for like a radio spot. Like this radio station just needed people to do like radio spots. So I did a few of those. So I never really like planned to go that route. And so I never really trained in that arena either. So sometimes I'll get hired for stuff and they're like, you're not a trained voice actor. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Sorry. So yeah, it wasn't something that I planned on doing. And I think too, at the time when Archer kind of came about, there was kind of this transition that was happening in voice acting where they were like, we want people that have more regular voices. And so like the announcer voice was becoming less common in commercial work, and the character voice was becoming less popular in cartoon work. And so all the actors on Archer just basically have their own voice. My voice is a little bit of a character voice, but they were actually they didn't want to do that because they're like, it's harder to maintain over time. But I got lucky and I just kind of was able to keep doing it until they didn't realize that I was doing it anymore. Yeah, especially when I'm at cons, like if I'm at a convention, people are like, will you say like holy shit snacks or whatever? So I get it a lot, but only because people don't really know what I look like. So when I'm just around, people don't know who I am, but definitely at cons, or if somebody sees me in a show and they come to see me, they'll ask me to do it. And I don't mind it at all. I'm like, great, ask me to do this for the rest of my life. Like, I'm glad that you care, I'm glad that people still watch this show, so I'll do it until I'm dead. No, I make sure I don't say anything that Pam would say in my regular life, because I feel like it's like super douchey to be like, hey, by the way, do you guys know what I do for a living? I'm just gonna use some of these lines from my show. Even like if I have like, because we get lots of merch, you know, like we'll get a t-shirt from a con or like something's got Pam on it. And I'm like, this is so cool, but I can never wear it because I would just look like the biggest asshole. So when I was working on Frisky Dingo, like I said, it was just a bunch of like dirty dudes, like hunched over computers, like making cartoons. And it was in a house in East Atlanta that was like, I guess they just bought this house to make cartoons in it. And so the living room was just like a few desks with computers. And when I would go to record my lines, it was in this bedroom, and they had like outfitted the closet with like soundproofing. But the thing is that they had put a double door on. So it had the regular like crappy closet door from when the house was built in the 1940s or whatever. And they put this other door on. So I would go in and close the door and lock it. And they would close this other door behind me and lock me in. And I was like, good God. If I had to do that now, I would totally have a panic attack. Back then I was like, whatever, I need the $200 they're going to pay me. and it was like, there was no like air vents in there. And it's like so hot. And I think that they could patch into my headphones, or maybe they would just have to like yell from outside through the soundproofing to give me notes. It was not an ideal situation, but it was pretty fun that like that's how scrappy the making of this show was. It ended up like going on television and being like broadcast nationally. So crazy. And then like there was a character on the show named Mr. Ford, and he was the guy that mowed their lawn. Like that's the kind of voice actors they were getting. Like just a man off the street. They're like, hey man that mows our lawn, you want to do a voice on this show? So it wasn't a stretch that I was able to like land this job. Yeah, it was crazy. I was pretty much expecting Archer to be the same kind of situation. Like it was the same guys, but they had more money and they were on a different network. And so they like cleaned up their act. They got like a real office space, and we like would record at a real studio that they like paid money with an engineer to like actually be a real legit thing. And over the years, like it was still pretty small in the beginning. I think when Archer was like season 1, there weren't that many people working on the show. Like it was probably under 50, and now it's like over 200 people because there's like a different department. There's like 3D animation department. Like there's so many people working on the show. It's incredible. So it's been fun to watch them grow their production over the 10 years we've been doing it. No, I think I could totally go back to it because, you know, when we do stuff at Dad's Garage, we don't have any money. Like we're a nonprofit, small little scrappy theater. So like, I do think I'll always do like little scrappy projects for fun because that's where I come from. That's where I think a lot of like good art starts, you know? So I think, yeah, I'll never be too good to record in a closet. I might have a panic attack, but I'll do it. A day at Archer, like I always tell people when I explain what I actually do, they're like, this is the easiest job on earth. And it really is. Like I'm so lucky. So in a season of Archer, like now we're making 8 episode seasons, maybe 10 episodes this season. I'm not for sure. And the work is all the animators. They do all the work and the writers. But I'll get a script sent to me a couple days early, and I'll go in. And when I get my script, I'll read it, usually in bed the night before. I was like trying to stay awake, like reading the script. Then I'll get up. I'll get ready. It's usually kind of early, and by early, I mean 10 a.m. I mean, I'm an actor. I usually do shows at night. And I go in. The guys are already there. There's the producer and the director, and I go into the booth, and I'm usually there for like 30 minutes, and then I'm done. And that's once an episode. So like each episode takes me about 30 minutes, and there's only 10 episodes, and they're only producing it for like 8 months of the year. So like I work like once a week, but once every 3 weeks for like 8 months. It's the craziest, like easiest job. And when I go in, like it's just me in the booth. We don't record together because it's easier and quicker, so cheaper if we do it alone. And I'll usually read my line 3 different times, like maybe in 3 different kind of ways. And then if they like that, we'll move on. Or if they want to give me a note or read with me to get timing down, we'll do that. But literally like a whole episode, especially because I'm a secondary character, like for John, when he's recording Archer's lines, it probably takes him longer, a couple hours, because he usually has more lines. So yeah, for me, it's like 30 minutes, 45 max. So I didn't know if they animated before or after. And so what I've gleaned over the years is that generally shows are animated and then the voice work is done after if it's a film. But for television, usually the voice work is done first and then they animate. So we go in way before the voice work gets done. So as soon as the script is written, we go in and record. And I think part of that is because if we come up with something, if we improvise something in the room, they want to be able to incorporate that so that's why they animate after, so in case something changes. And so we'll do some different lines. We'll do what's on the page, but then we'll try some different things just in case. We're like, oh, this might work. And then the editor kind of decides what the framework of the voice track is going to be, and then they animate afterwards. We do get to improvise some. I think they like that we're improvisers. Like Lucky Yates, who does Dr. Krieger, is also on the show, and he's also an improviser, and he worked on Frisky Dingo also. So they've got a good relationship with Dad's Garage. They've used us on a lot of different projects. So I think they like working with improvisers because they like the way that we approach projects. But that being said, there's not a lot of room for improvising because the scripts are pretty tight, and they've gone through notes with the network, and they've gotten kind of streamlined to exactly what they want it to be. So there's not a lot of room for it, but it will happen in that like there's like a group scene and something happens and there's a reaction to like somebody like a bomb goes off and there's a reaction. So there's everybody lines and people are just reacting to it. So there's a lot of improv in that. Like people are screaming in that time. So that makes it in a lot. And then there are definitely improvised lines. I can't remember anything that I've actually improvised that made it into the show because it usually is like 8 months later that it actually airs. Adam Reed says that I improvised Holy Shit Snacks, but I'm like, I did not improvise that. That was totally written. I don't even know where I would have come up with that. But yeah, they give us the freedom just so that we're comfortable, even though we probably are going to use what's on the page at the end. Yeah, in the beginning, it was really hard. When I first started doing voice work, it was really hard to hear myself, much like people don't like looking at themselves, or a lot of people don't like hearing themselves recorded. But over time, I just got used to it, and I was like, that's what my voice sounds like, but there's nothing I can do about it. Or like now when I see myself on camera, I'm like, well, that's what I look like. I mean, it's just the truth, right? So for me, I really genuinely am a fan of the show. And so I watch the episode when it airs. And usually like I'll live tweet it or something. And so it's just a fun thing to kind of hang out and do. So yeah, I watch it. And most of the times I will have forgotten what's happened in the show because it was so long ago that we recorded it. And I'll sit down and watch the show with my friends and it's super duper fun. I will say that Pam is actually my favorite character. Yeah. I think that if I had to play it, I got really lucky that she's like the best character. She gets to say the most terrifying and terrible things. And she's also like, in a weird way, kind of the heart of the show. Like, she's just as terrible as everybody else. But at the end of the day, I think she genuinely loves everybody. So I really do. She really is my favorite character. And I'm really proud of her, like who she's become over the years. Like Pam was in the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition like 3 years ago. I was like, what? As a kid from the 80s, I would have never in a million years imagined that would ever be something that would happen. So I think that she's like an incredible character. But if I did have to choose a second one, it would probably be Gillette, who is like a totally like, not everybody knows Gillette, but I'm like, man, he is so funny. Like, what a ridiculously great character. And I think if there was ever a spinoff, Pam and Gillette being like a buddy cop team would be really funny. Yeah, so in 10 years, I don't think in the beginning, I didn't realize the show was going to go on for 10 years. I was just like, I just need a job. And then after the first season aired and there was like some critical success, people were like into it, but not a lot of people started watching it yet. I was like, oh, there's like something to this show and people are like really into it. And so I still can't believe it's been on for 10 years and I can't believe it's been as successful as it is. And for me personally, like, it's just like, oh my God, it's been 10 years. What am I doing? But I think that I could have totally left Georgia and I didn't because I was like, I really, like, the show's made here, which is cool. But also in those 10 years, like so much has happened in Georgia and Georgia's really become like Yollywood. Like it's become, you know, this big hub for entertainment, which has been really cool to watch. And my theater's here, you know, it's my artistic home and my family's here. And so I haven't left Georgia. And I was like, I really want to make sure, and I go to LA all the time and I'll spend like sometimes months at a time there. But I bought a house in Cabbagetown and I was like, I'm really like committing to living here. I really, really love being here. So in my life, it's been like the hugest thing that ever happened to me. I had no idea this job was going to become what it is and that it's going to still keep going. I mean, we don't know for sure, but we don't think it's ending at 10. So it's been a crazy ride that I still am like, one day I'll be like, oh shit, all that happened to me. Right now I'm just like, whatever, I don't know. I'm just like, I always tell people if like I meet people at a con or something and they're like nervous to meet me, I'm like, oh my God, why? Like I'm just a regular person. I do theater. You could come see a show at Dad's Garage anytime. You can talk to me afterwards. So I try, and I think because when like Archer became successful, I was already like a fully formed human being. I was in my 30s. Like I knew who I was. And so having that success didn't like change me as a person, you know, it's just like, oh, that's cool. I don't have to worry about like taking shitty gigs for $100 now. That's really the biggest difference. Honestly, I haven't done a ton of other voice work. Like I've done little spots here and there. Like I did an episode of I did an episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and I did an episode of Squidbillies, which are both Adult Swim shows that Dave Willis does. Who's Barry on Archer, and also he does a ton of stuff in Atlanta. But no, I audition for stuff all the time. And honestly, when I first got Archer, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna lay back and the phone's gonna ring off the hook and I'm just gonna be getting jobs all the time. And it's like, no, that is not how it works. I still audition all the time, like every other actor. Like I go into my closet and like record auditions, and it's a very competitive field because anybody that's got a microphone can go into their closet and record voiceover auditions. So when they're auditioning for like a small role on a show, they're getting like over 1,000 submissions sometimes. So it's like, who's gonna get this job? Who knows? Like it could literally be anybody. So I haven't done a ton of other stuff. So if you've got a voice acting job and you want to give it to me, I'll totally do it. I love doing voice work because it's easy and it's fun. But I really want to do more on-camera work. I love being on stage. Like I'll do stage work forever because it's like instant gratification, especially when comedy and improv, like there's just nothing like it. So I probably will do that until I'm so old that people are like, Amber, we can't do this anymore. We're not going to allow you to be on stage. But I really want to do more on-camera work, and it's a different muscle. I think it's like if you're a chef and you know how to like make pastries, and then you want to be able to make a really good omelet, it's two totally different skill sets. And I think that on-camera acting and voice acting and stage acting are all like that too. And so I'm still learning about on-camera acting and getting better at it. And I audition all the time like a regular actor. I go in for auditions and put stuff on tape. So I really want to do more of it. And at Dad's Garage too, we have a kind of side wing that's Dad's Garage TV. And so we're making stuff that's online and lives online. And so I'm starting to do more of that. And my husband, Kevin Galise, who's also the artistic director, he's a writer. And so we've been doing projects. We did a short film and we've done we did a web series. And so we're trying to kind of do as much as we can. Because it's also like I can wait around for somebody to give me a really good role, or I can make my own stuff and get to do what I want. For me, a dream would be if I had a show where I got to play like a bunch of different characters. Like if I could do the Nutty Professor. Let's do this, guys. Okay, let's get some funding and I'll be the new Nutty Professor. People are like, great, we need a white woman in her 40s. This is going to be a smash success. Yeah, if I got to play a lot of different characters on a show, so not necessarily sketch, but sketch would totally be fun. But yeah, getting to wear a bunch of different stupid wigs and play a bunch of different characters, that's where it's at. So Kevin started as a performer. He's totally an improviser. That's how we met. He's from Canada, and so we met in like 99 when he first came down to Atlanta, because we would send people up to his theater to do shows, and his theater would send people down to ours, or we'd be touring or at festivals and we'd see each other. And so he was totally an improviser, and then he started doing more admin stuff, and he became the artistic director of his theater in Edmonton. And then when Dad's Garage was looking for an artistic director, we did like a big search, like national search, and a bunch of people from Canada also applied, and he applied and he got the job. So he doesn't do as much performing as he used to, but he still totally does. Like we have a 2-person show that we tour, which makes it more fun because then like I'm traveling with my husband, so it's kind of work and it's kind of vacation. So yeah, he's still totally a performer, but just not as much as he used to be. His style and my style, thankfully, are very complementary, because when I improvise, I'm more of like a in-the-moment improviser that likes to play a lot of like stupid characters, and Kevin's more of like he likes to kind of look at the scene from above and put the story together. And so he oftentimes will play like the main character and the person that really is in charge of making the story make sense. And I'm just like screwing around and playing stupid characters. So those two things together, we can usually make a show that makes sense, because he's like reining me in to keep the story making sense. And we do it, our 2-person show we do is basically we write a screenplay in an hour. So he plays the main character and I play all the other characters. And it's so much fun. We have a blast. Yeah, we do it at Dad's on occasion. It's called Working Title. And so we're usually like a cage match team. So we'll do cage match on Friday nights. And then sometimes when we tour, we'll take it with us too. Yeah, I work with lots of people at Dad's. In the back in the day, there was just less people. So there was, the ensemble was like 12 people. Now the ensemble, I think, is close to 30. Plus there's all the people that aren't ensemble members. So we have a big company of improvisers. So I get to work with a lot of different people, and we're always bringing in new people too. So it's keeping it fresh and younger improvisers. And but there are a lot of people that I work with pretty regularly. Whitney, who you know, and Karen, and another improviser, Megan. The 4 of us have a duo called, a quattro. Is that what you'd call it? A quattro called Sweater Puppies, where we get people to bring in clothes they're going to donate, and we use those clothes to kind of inspire our improv, and then we take them all to donate to a charity afterwards. It's really fun. And then Matt Horgan is the guy that's been around Dad's for forever, and he and I do a show called Big Ol' Show that's like a big, like, Gone with the Wind, antebellum Southern tale. And we take that on the road too, because people are like, well, you're from the South, like, why don't you give us something Southern? So it does really well. We've toured it in Europe. We've toured it in Canada, and we took it to Alaska, and people were like, oh, this is fun. Like, it's just us being big, dumb Southern people. Yeah, it's really fun. And we play like these narrators that are like old, like pipe smoking, like, well, and next we'll go down the road to the riverbanks. Yeah, very fun. I have done mostly comedy. I get a lot of auditions for stuff it's more dramatic. Like, they're like, we want you to play a cop. And I'm like, okay. Or a doctor. A lot of those, I'm just like, oh, really? I mean, I'll take the job if you want to give it to me, but I don't think it's where, like, I feel like I'm not that good at it. But I'm learning to get better at it. So I haven't done a lot of it, but people always want me to audition for those kinds of things. So I guess it's like they want me to do it. So maybe I'll be a cop on a show one day. I think my favorite role that I ever got to play was honestly Ebenezer Scrooge. Dad's Garage every Christmas does Christmas Carol, but we call it Invasion Christmas Carol because we rehearse the show like we're doing Christmas Carol. And then when we actually start doing the show, 10 minutes into the show, somebody shows up that doesn't belong there. So it's like, we're doing Christmas Carol, and then like the A-team shows up, and it's like, oh shit. And the cast has to figure out how to keep the show on the rails while this craziness is happening. And so the very first year we did it, I got to be Ebenezer Scrooge, and it was like the most fun. Because Ebenezer is like so snarky and shitty, and then you have this great redemption in the end. Like, it was one of the most fun characters I've ever gotten to play. I would do it again in a heartbeat. The Dad's was like, Dad's Garage, it was Dan Trandaffel was directing. He's like, you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, awesome. So it wasn't cutthroat at all. But now, in today's world, I feel like there's so many shows that are being reimagined with female leads as opposed to male leads. So maybe it's time for there to be like an Ebenezer Scrooge, Ebenezer. So maybe there'll be a movie one day where I get to play Ebenezer Scrooge again. Oh, the Doug Dank Project was a project that Renee Delafont started. And it was me, Renee Delafont, Matt Stanton, George Fawnin, and Dan Triandaflo. And we all did improv at Push Push Theater, which was in Decatur. This was years ago. I think we probably stopped doing it in like 2009. And we would have storytellers that would tell stories. It's very similar to the Armando or Story Spot. And somebody would tell stories, and then we would use those stories as inspiration to inspire the round of scenes that we'd do after that. And we did that for maybe like 4 or 5 years. It was a really fun project. It was just kind of an outside of Dad's kind of improv excursion. Catch-23 is a show that I believe was developed in Toronto. Dad's Garage has a lot of connections to Canada because most of the North American sports theaters are in Canada, and they have great festivals up there. So Dad's Garage oftentimes will travel to festivals in Canada. So we know people in Toronto, in Edmonton, and Winnipeg, and Vancouver, and so we do a lot of traveling up there. And so Catch-23 is a show that was up there that I believe Renee Delafont actually brought down to Atlanta to do where were we doing it? We were doing it at the place in, anyway, doesn't matter. Who cares? So we were doing that show in Atlanta for a while, and it was super duper fun. And basically it was like, you get a team, and each team gets 23 minutes, and you can break that up anytime you want. So you could do your first round, you get 4 rounds. So you could do a 1-minute round, a 10-minute round. So you can break it up, or you can do like 1, 1, 1, 1, and then like the rest of your time. So kind of however you want to do it. So it's fun to kind of watch teams compete and see how they break up their time and how they use that to tell their stories. So much comedy in Atlanta now. And there's a lot of improv too. The Village is a great place to see improv. It's a little bit like scrappier and like younger feeling, I think. A lot of our younger performers perform there a lot. Village is really fun. There's Whole World. Whole World's been around for a really long time, longer than Dad's actually. And then there's people that have groups that perform in all these different places. So there's stuff happening absolutely everywhere. I think there's improv that happens at the Highland Ballroom. Like, it's everywhere. So if you just Google improv in Atlanta, you're gonna find so many different things. And I think it's great to go to like a big theater like Dad's and see improv, but then also to kind of check out what else is going on, like more underground. Like, when I feel like I said before, like good comedy, I think comes out of like not a sazzily, perfectly produced, in a beautiful theater place. I think like comedy, when it's good, a lot like music, is like, you want to find like what's in that weird like dirty bar, like what are these guys like experimenting with? And I think comedy is the same way. So like finding like a cool like group that's doing some crazy weird shit is like great. So you have to kind of find it. Yeah, improv classes I think are so beneficial if you want to become an improviser, but also if you want to be better at job interviews, or you want to be a better communicator, or whatever. Like, it's so beneficial. Like, it really changed my life, and I think it does for a lot of people. And it's really good for teenagers too. Like, I feel like kids coming out of high school, especially now when everybody's like on their phone all the time, I think it's such a good way to connect with people. So I think it's really, really important. And there's so many places that do classes. We do classes at Dad's, and we have like 4 different levels. So you could just be like, I just want to take level 1 and check it out. And that's like 8 weeks long. Or you could like go all the way through and become like a master improviser. They do them at Village. They do them at Highwire. So there's places all over the city. And if you go to everybody's website, one of the first things that you'll find is their classes. And they're really easy to sign up. Everybody makes it very accessible, because that's a great way for theater companies to make money, is on classes. And so they're everywhere. So I highly recommend taking one. And they're different. They're all different too. So if you're like, well, I got this from one theater, but I still want to keep taking classes, then you can take classes at other places. And the other thing too is that lots of times, like, I'm still friends with people that I took level 1 improv with. Like, I still work, like Alex Orr, he's a filmmaker in town. He works on Atlanta. He's still a friend of mine, and we were in level 1 at Dad's Garage together like 20 years ago. So you become close to people because you're like, you're being vulnerable and you're trying stuff you've never done before, and it's a creative experience. And so it's a great way to meet people too. Yeah, in the beginning, it definitely was a boys club at Dad's, and in comedy in general. And this was like, I'm not talking about the 60s. Like, this was recently. It's like finally we're starting to come around and realize that everybody's got comedy voices. And not just women and men, but like the company's way more diverse. Like it was a bunch of white dudes, and just when the company becomes more diverse, the stories become more diverse, and that means that they're more interesting, and so we're doing better stuff. And so I think that it's true that once there were more women in the company, and in the beginning when I was kind of the only woman in the ensemble, there was one woman that came before me and then she left, and then they're like, I guess we have room for another woman, right? There's one spot for a woman. I was also kind of protective of it, like, because I was like, well, there's only one spot, like, I got it, I better keep it. And so it took me some learning and growing to be like, I've got to make space for other women too, so that I don't have to tell these guys stories. I can start telling stories that women want to tell, and that are for everybody. You know what I mean? And so I learned to kind of let that loose and be like more inclusive myself, and learning how to help bring women up. And now the company is telling way better stories because we have more diversity, and they're so much fun. And so now there are more roles for women. Like there's shows now where you'll be on stage at Dad's and you're like, oh my God, it's mostly women. Or in an improv show, it'll be like, it's mostly women. This is awesome. And it's not even a thing. Like, we don't think about it anymore, you know? In the show I'm in at Dad's right now, Megan Leahy wrote, and she was the woman that came into the ensemble after me, and we were roommates. And so kind of that whole situation and that relationship was really crazy. Like we went through so much together. But she wrote a show that is basically Mad Men, but reimagining the world if women were in charge. And so like all the men are secretaries, and they all have to like wear like little short shorts and like really bright colors and like scarves, and the women are all wearing like boxy suits and cursing and smoking. But what she said is, she was like, all the women in the show, the age is a whole other thing that happens with women. She's like, all the women in the show that I'm casting are going to be over 35, and all the men that I'm casting are going to be under 25. And it's like, that's never happened before. But it's always the other way around, right? And so like, she was a woman that made a show, and she made sure there was spaces for women. The whole crew is female. Most of the designers were women. And so, yeah, and I don't think it has to be that you have to make space, but I think that also once people see like, oh, this designer's really great, I've worked with her before because she got this opportunity, but she's just a really good designer. And so now I think of her because I've worked with her before. And so just getting people in a couple times so that they're in the machine, and they're like, oh yeah, these people are all really talented. It doesn't matter if they're a woman or a man. So it's been incredible to watch, and I'm glad that I was able to like learn along the way too, and not be one of those people that are like, well, no, I don't give opportunity to women because I want to keep that opportunity for myself, because there's enough for everybody. And then people are like, well, women are catty, and it's like, well, I mean, we have to fight it out because you gave us one spot. So, but thankfully that's changing. So my recommendations, OTP. Highwire is a comedy theater that's not I don't think it's ITP, I think it is OTP. So that's a great place to see comedy that's a little bit outside of the city, or take classes. And they do a lot of workshops there too, like one-off stuff with people coming through. I love Blue Ridge. Blue Ridge is like the best place to be like, hey, I need to get out of town for the weekend. So it's like you just drive north and then you're in the mountains, which is also super cool. The other thing about Blue Ridge that I think is so awesome that not a lot of people know about is there's a place there called Project Chimps. I'm on the board, so I'm just going to say that. So I'm not just, I kind of know what I'm talking about. This just happened. I'm really lucky that this happened. So it's a sanctuary for chimpanzees that have been retired from research, and it's like in Blue Ridge, and nobody knows about it. And it's like hundreds of acres. It's really an amazing place. It's not open to the public, but if people are interested, you can volunteer. And it's not open to the public because chimps get to like live their life and not be like looked at by a bunch of snotty kids. Kids are great. So it's an incredible place if you're interested in chimps, or if you're looking to volunteer or do something different. It's really cool. Also, we were actually just talking about this because we talk about it in our show, is Johnny's Hideaway, which is a great like dive bar for older folks. That's so much fun to go to. It's one of my favorite places. What else is good? My parents are in Gwinnett, so I go to, oh my God. Jeju, which is a Korean spa that's in Gwinnett, is one of the best places ever. It's near Gwinnett Place Mall, and it's like, you pay $25 to get in, and you can stay there for 24 hours if you want to. And there's like different like pools, like jacuzzi type stuff. You can get massages. You have to pay extra for extra stuff, but there's like steam rooms and hot and cold rooms, and like like Korean ladies that'll like scrub your skin really hard. Like it is so awesome. I highly recommend it. But also there's like, you have to, like when you go into the wet areas, you have to be naked. So if you're like, I'm gonna go with my friends, just know that you're all gonna see each other naked. My life is it's pretty normal. Like I do a lot of performing, so I spend a lot of time at the theater. But like when we're just hanging out, we've got a dog named Carol, who's like a brindle pit bull. We say she's a pit bull supermodel mix because she's very like thin and lean and gorgeous. We try to feed her and she's like, I don't like food. And it's like, great. So it's me and Kevin and Carol, and we live in Cabbagetown. And my mom actually grew up in Cabbagetown, like in the 60s. And people are like, don't go to Cabbagetown. It's a bad part of town. So I have a lot of history there, which is really awesome. And we love to travel. Kevin toured a lot before he came to Atlanta to take the job. And so we go to Europe a lot. I'm going to New Zealand for a con in a couple of weeks. So I do a lot of con appearances, which is really fun. It's a great way to travel too. Yeah, we like to see movies like Game of Thrones tomorrow night. Last episode, we got friends that also live in Cabbagetown that we like to hang out with and watch TV. And we're pretty chill. Traveling is our biggest thing. We travel a lot. And then I have a niece that like house sits for us, and she like just gets to have like this sweet house in Cabbagetown like half the year when we're out of town. It's pretty great. It's called Ad Nauseam, and it's running until June 1st. The last weekend of the performance, I'm not going to be in it. Megan, the writer and director, will be in it because I'll be in New Zealand. But I play the main character, Trudy Femster, and it's, if you watched Mad Men, which was about like ad guys in the 60s, like kind of when advertising first like blossomed into what it is today. So it's lots of smoking, lots of like, Mad Men is men being like, you know, very masculine, women being like housewives. And so we've turned that on its head, and all the main characters are women and all the secondary characters are men. But they also, we follow their story too. So the men are all the secretaries and basically fill the role of the housekeeper and the homemaker and stuff like that, and the women get to run the world. And it's very funny. Like, it's not preachy at all. It's more just like, yeah, our world's kind of fucked up. It used to be even more fucked up. So it's fun to look at and see, like, and because it's advertising, we do a lot of ads in the show, and you get to see, like, we have people that work at Dad's Garage that are actually in advertising that have mocked up ads if they were gender reversed. And so, like, I don't know if you remember, Mentadent is like, I think it's like an old style toothpaste, but in our show it's Womentadent, and Womenin instead of Menin. Which is like the deodorant company. And like one of the great ones is like a guy that's like selling like diet soda, and he's like, it's called Callow. He's like, I drink Callow for the pleasure of staying slim. Just like shit like that are just like, oh yeah, like the ads used to be so terrible in the 60s. And it's really fun to play with, and it's just in that world. So it's like very like mid-century modern, the set and all the costumes. It's super fun. With the premiere of Archer, which will be May 29th, Lucky Yates and I are doing kind of like a Talking Dead style after show. So Archer will premiere on FXX, and then we're going to do a live show right afterwards that'll be on Facebook Live, and it's Lucky and I. We're the hosts, and it's basically like, hey, welcome to our party. And so it's in a big room. There's a bunch of party goers, and we interview guests. We talk about the episode. It's really fun. We did like a full tech rehearsal. And just to get I'd never done like a broadcast live show before. And it's a lot of moving parts, and you're like, shit, I mean, we gotta go, like it's live. So we did a full tech rehearsal, and so we're gearing up to make that. And we're doing 3 of them. We're doing the first episode, the middle episode, and then the last episode. So we're hoping to get a lot of eyes on it. It'll be really fun. Let's see, what is coming up that I'm excited about? It's all work related. Oh, this is so ridiculous. I am such a lady in my 40s. At my house in Cabbagetown, I'm always like doing stuff to the house. I'm like, oh, I need to do this and do this. And I'm having my closets redone, and I'm very excited because they're not big closets. Like, they're just like open up and like get your stuff out of the closets, but like they really need to be reorganized. So somebody's coming in and like, you know, doing all the stuff and making drawers, and you know, it's gonna be awesome. It's called California Closets. That's like the name of the company, and they like, you know, they just make it more functional. I also have to get rid of a ton of clothes because I just have too much shit in there. I think that what I'd like to see, honestly, not to get too political, is that we have to overturn this abortion bill. It's such a nightmare, in my opinion. I think it's going to drive a lot of work out of the state. I think it's just unfortunate for a lot of people. And I think that in the last election, there was a lot of like, are we going to turn the state purple? So I would love to see that happen. I've always lived in a place that was super conservative my whole life, and I love this state, but I think there's a lot of people that are a little bit more moderate and a little more liberal that also have voices in this state. And so I'd like to be in a place where my vote doesn't just go to shit. So I'd like to see that happen. And I think that's happening. I think part of the arts community becoming more robust kind of means that some liberals kind of come out of the woodwork, which is really nice. Sorry, Dad. My dad's like, God damn it. So yeah, I'd love to see that happen. And I think that one of the great things about Atlanta is because we've always been, we're not LA, we're not New York, we're a smaller town, but I think that's enabled us to have more of an indie art scene, and I think that that's where the cool stuff is happening, and I hope that we still, as we get big and industry's coming here, I hope we still keep that indie spirit where it's like, hey, I want to make something, I got to get a couple people together and I can actually make a show. You know, I think that's one of the really amazing things about this city, especially for artists, that I hope continues to stick around. I think it's part of the lifeblood of the city artistically, and with visual art. Like Free Art Friday is such a cool thing that happens in Atlanta, and there's so much good visual art. And living in Cabbagetown, there's the Krog Street Tunnel, and there's people that are doing graffiti and street art all the time. So I just don't want to see that go anywhere with our city getting bigger. Let's see. Oh, go to Dad's Garage TV. There's so much good stuff there. Our web series is there. You can see it. It's called Heart of America, HART, or you can go to heartofamerica.com and see it there. There's tons of stuff on Dad's Garage TV, which is its own. You can get it on our website, or you can go to YouTube and get it. You can follow me on Instagram, Amber C. Nash, or not Facebook. I'm not on Facebook. I am on Facebook, but I never check it because it's like, I don't want to hear what my aunt's doing. I don't want to know what she's doing right now. On Twitter, Amber C. Nash also. And we don't know when it's going to happen, but my husband and I and some of our other friends that we work with are going to be making a feature later this year. So we're going to be pushing that. So follow us online.